Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the African American Democratic Club monthly meeting. And also, this is a meeting that we're trying to develop as a new form of strategic alliance engagement. We have a reason for inviting different force individuals to this meeting now. And also, not only today, in the future, not only people that agree with our viewpoints and people who disagree with our viewpoints, but we feel that we have to create a solid alliance with forces that we genuinely believe within the progressive perspective that we have common interests at stake. It is a privilege for me to welcome Ms. Rose Park. I don't know much about her other than that she's a leading figure in San Francisco and also a genuine, profound leader of the Chinese community and minority issues in general. So, and welcome, Ms. Park. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I don't know how I got myself roped into this. Generally, I don't attend other people's club meetings. I don't like to sit on other people's boards, and I certainly do not like to tell people what to do or what not to do, because I personally know my own shortcomings. I'm very opinionated, I'm very direct, and I certainly am not diplomatic. So all those attributes that are not very conducive to being, an instrument or bridge or whatever you want to call it, and especially I have no patience and no tolerance for stupidity, what have you. So I get myself into a lot of trouble because of my outspokenness. So I tend not to go public. But sometimes I get caught up and the press come to me, so I tell them where to go, or in the process of whatever I was expressing, my language became very colorful, and so they said I was foul mouthed. I came here when I was 17 to go to college. I was a product of a communist takeover in China, and I lost my father in the process, and my mom landed in Hong Kong with 3 little girls, and she worked very hard by sewing and brought us all up, and we took the opportunity, all 3 of us studied very hard and gained scholarship to different parts of the world. I was accepted at Cambridge University, as well as University in America, with a scholarship. I decided to come to America instead of Great Britain because Hong Kong was a colony then, and there was a lot of resentment in my family about colonial powers. So I opted for US, and my mom was very happy. When I came to San Francisco in '67 to attend college, this was right after the period where Watts riot had happened a couple of years before. And of course, everything in America was brand new to me, and I made a great effort to try to understand what makes up America. What is America? And African American community was one of the first community that I was attracted to. Every weekend, I was up and down all your churches, trying to, I was brought up a Catholic, so most of the churches in the Fillmore in those days were, except for one, were not Catholics, but I still find it fascinating. I just curious. Well, to make a very long story short, after I graduated from the university, eventually I attended journalism school at Columbia in New York and got my master's and got hired at the New York Times. I did not like New York. It was too hot and humid. So I came back to San Francisco and worked at the San Francisco Chronicle. I was the first Asian American that they hired at the San Francisco Chronicle. First Asian reporter in the whole Bay Area, Asia. I learned a lot as a reporter because they sent me all over covering everything. That's how I learned more about the city and the history, and I just, in every free moment, I went to get involved in Chinatown and found out the history. All those were brand new to me. Over the years, I've come to the conclusion that as Chinese Americans, we owe a debt of gratitude to the African American community who blazed the trails for us, whether it's affirmative action, whether it's set aside or whatever. If it weren't for the African American communities, all minorities would never have a prayer. So, having said that, I always felt that our community should have a natural affinity to look out for each other's interest. I latched myself eventually to the likes of Willie Brown, who was then starting as leaders of the African American community. I learned at the foot of the masters in the liberal fields. In those days, it was dominated by Phil Burton, who was our local congressman, and his brother John Burton, and then Moscone came next, then Willie Brown. Willie Brown taught me a great deal. Not because today I'm speaking to an African American Democratic Club that I mentioned Willie Brown. I always talk about Willie Brown. He taught me the great tent, how your tent has to be big enough to accommodate everybody. He taught me how to forgive. I couldn't understand people insult him. Turn around, he still helps them. Those are attributes that, did not come naturally. Those are attributes that you learn. He has done more for the minority communities in this city, or for that matter for the state of California, than anybody cares to remember. But what happened, I told him, while he was building and helping on the bigger picture, statewide, nationwide. So he, in some ways, neglected some of the smaller details in his home in San Francisco. So by the time term limit came along, and he had I was one of those people that convinced him to come back to be the mayor of San Francisco so that he could help break down a lot of the barriers that has been set up that he was trying to break, you know, on the state level, or for that matter, nationwide. So he immediately, without having to explain, understood what I meant. And he did say, Ms. Rose, I heard you loud and clear, and I hope that I was one of those people that eventually convinced him, and he came back to run for mayor.